So I don't know how Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York City gets to survive after this recent Attorney General report I just heard. But, you know, he did win an Emmy. And what about Trump? Before I get into this, I want to mention that some of these things I'm talking about are still at the allegation phase. But regardless, we are talking about victims here, people who have been victimized in one way or another. There's still some known unknowns here. The unknown is what is, who is, how is, what has actually been the situation, like who is the victim in the situation. So this could be people have been victimized by certain predators, by the actions that these predators took. It could be a situation where people have been falsely accused for things that they never did. There's a third situation, which mostly when it's words, certain words could have been said that were intended to be taken in a certain way and were received in a different way. This third part is a bit harder to apply to some of the actual allegations of physical actions that have been taken if you actually look into these things. Before I get back to Cuomo, I'm going to talk about Activision Blizzard here, which is one of the biggest gaming companies in the world. And gaming, I think, is the most lucrative industry in the world right now. And some of the allegations coming out are just some of the most horrific things you'll hear about. Truly diabolical things coming out of there, pun intended, with the game that they make, Diablo. So adult mentality required. The allegations range from things like not paying people the same amount and issues to do with union busting or dissuading unions, to getting into the sexual assault where violations of privacy where there's cameras in bathrooms, insinuating that people must do certain physical things with people, to outright sexual assault of the most egregious kind. And even to the point of supposedly somebody committed suicide after being pressured and subjected to this kind of environment. As I mentioned, you can go out and find more things. There's ongoing coverage of this, but it's some rough stuff, so be prepared. On the other hand, you have Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. The Attorney General of New York finally released the results of the investigation into the several allegations of sexual assault and sexual harassment to Andrew Cuomo over multiple years. The report has found those to be credible, and as I mentioned, we will see what happens in the court of law. These things either happened or they did not happen. What I wanted to focus on was the realization of looking at these things. I think most of us can relate to or understand that whole feeling of being in a position where something wrong has happened, but you are not in a position, you don't feel you're in a position to say something and be heard, or you've said something and not been listened to. This is true to a lot of us, unfortunately. And much of this comes from our childhoods, where we had people in power over us, where we spoke out and we were told, no, you have to listen to that person. Or we had different situations of abuse in parenting and things like this, where our objections to the way we were being treated were not listened to. And to that end, I'm encouraged by just the spreading of peaceful parenting and the effect that that is going to have on human flourishing and human civilization. I'm just imagining, how is the world going to be when even just 10% of the population has been peacefully parented since they were kids? I think it'll be a much better place. But that's not where we live now. Right now, we have certain people who live in certain environments, and they know people around them who would never do this. So they look at the accusations and say, oh, how can you actually imagine that has happened? We don't believe that happens as much as you. There's no systemic this, there's no systematic that. And then on the other end, you have people who have been mired in this kind of environment. And then they might project this on the rest of the world and think, this is how everybody lives. This is the state of the world. Nobody will do anything about this. And I imagine that can lead to some despair. Especially when the very same people that subjected them to this environment, that have abused them in this way, preyed on them, are then lauded by greater society for supposedly standing up against this very action that they've been doing. So regardless of what happens judicially, Andrew Cuomo has released a statement and he's putting his side of the story out there, addressing the allegations. Activision Blizzard is currently going through its own issues with its court of public opinion at this time. But the key thing I want to reiterate again is realize that some people live in certain environments that are horrific. Before you start lauding somebody, try to get to know more about who that person is before you start posting people up as great examples of XYZ. Don't just think that, oh yeah, these people finally said ABC, so they're all good. Because this pedestalizing of people, you might put people up in pedestals, and you find out that those boots that they're using to step up on that pedestal are the same ones they use to figuratively, and in some cases literally, crush down the lives of other people. So problems occur not because of what X is, because of how we define X. So to the people who have been victimized, the predators in many cases will want to encourage you to think that you will not be able to get any help, that this is the state of the world. But do realize that isn't true. The world is increasingly getting better. Yes, some people do get forgotten. Yes, some people do get missed. We can improve a lot on that. But I want to encourage people that if you are listening to this, there's a good chance you also have access to some communities, some people, somewhere, if not immediately in your life, somewhere, some means to speak out and find people who will believe you, who will trust you, who will listen to you. And maybe you'll be able to get any help that you may need. And for those of you who haven't been, who don't live around these kind of people, be glad about that. And also realize that that isn't the case for still too many people. Too many people don't have that benefit of living with that relative safety that you've experienced.